Word. Word up. What's up? Hello. We're gonna give it a little bit of time for people to wander on in. They need to have hiccups apparently. Hope everyone's having a good Saturday. Hope it's chill wherever you are. Let me grab myself a drink real quick. Got my drink. Sorry it's a mess back there. No one needs to see what's going on behind the mysterious curtain. How's everyone? I'm gonna probably start actually working. Oh, honk honk beep beep. I live on a very busy street, so we get lots of road noise here. Probably gonna get started in about 5-10 minutes. Give some people some time to come on in and join us. Oh, you know what? I think I forgot to change the panel. I did. I'm sorry. Ignore the kimono panel thing. That was my bad. It's supposed to say draping panel. I guess I could take like 5 seconds and change that. All right, let me do that really quick. All right, that did it. Sorry I derped out there. Okay, that's fixed. I said it takes just a few minutes. So while we're waiting for a few more people to join us, I'm going to show you some of the tools we're going to be using today. This is crepe tape, and all of this information is available in that panel that I just updated the overlay to have. Sometimes it's called chart tape. The main thing you want to make sure is that it's the crepe type. It kind of feels like masking tape. This is a 1/4 inch wide. I prefer an 1/8. This is a little too big, but it's easier to see on camera and like when I'm doing demonstrations. So I usually use 1/4 inch for when I do panels. Enjoy fabric scissors. Need some pins. I've already got a few in the neck of the dress form, but I guess I can go through and probably put some more in. It's kind of easy to have them on the neck of the dress form, kind of handy, so you can grab them easily and throw out any weird bent ones. And you're going to eventually need your like rulers and stuff to do the actual patterning stuff with. We'll get into that a little later though. But just for this, you need a dress form, some tape, some pins, some scissors, and some fabric. Retro game jam. Hey Diner, how's it going? So today I'm going to be using muslin. This is a little bit wrinkly because I washed it and then it got all twisted in the dryer. I actually ironed this, believe it or not, and it's still a little bit wrinkly pants, but that's okay. For our purposes, it doesn't really matter that much. So, I'm going to get started here in just a few with drape. Like, what we do is, like, first step is going to be, the first thing I'm going to do is put a piece of very tight fabric across the bust, because when you wear most dresses that are not cupped, like say if you're doing like a a bodice that has like boob cups, then yes, you want to keep this here. But otherwise, it's nice to have like a straight line across, because like most dresses and garments don't kind of go into the boob divot, for lack of a better description. So I'm going to put a piece of either twill tape if you have some. I'm going to use the selvage edge of the fabric because that's pretty tightly woven. And I'm going to pin it on there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's prep work. Prep work for this. So, oh cool, I just launched a piece of, so pins on the bust points, and you really, really want to get it tight across there. You're very clever, you will be able to bury this pin in here and somehow not have it poke out. I'm not that great at that particular task. Magic. I've had people do it, and I've seen it done, but I'm still poking out, so that's too bad. So sad. You just want to make sure that's very nice and tight across here. As tight as you can make it. And that's a good starting place, because most of the time if you're draping something that's symmetrical, there's no point in taping off the whole mannequin. So for example, let's say I'm just doing, for the purposes of this, we're just going to do a princess seamed bodice. We're not going to go anything like too crazy, because that's a pretty standard silhouette for like most Lolita garments. You might want to change where the princess seam line goes, and we'll talk about that for a little bit in a second. But like, if the dress is going to be the same on left and right, there is no point to taping off the whole thing, because you might have some small variation. Like this could go down a little bit and you don't really see that. What you want is to have it perfectly mirrored. However, if you're doing something that is like a one strapped situation, you would want to tape off both sides. But for our purposes, we're just going to do one side. I'm going to do Sheila, our lovely assistant. I'm going to do this side. It's the side I find easiest for me to personally drape on. If you are left-handed, it might be the other side is a little easier for you. So we're going to start off with just draping the neckline. You could have it, pretty high up if you want to be a little bit more conservative, but you got to make sure that you then shape under the arm. I'm going to turn that. or you can have a little bit lower. You can be a little bit, you know, daring with the neckline. That is up to you. I'm just going to kind of go fairly kind of in between. And we're going to shape around the arm side. This is just the neckline all the way around. To the center back. And these dress forms, if you're getting a professional dress form, this doesn't really work that well, unfortunately, with like those adjustable ones that you might get like from Dritz. They don't really work all that well for this purpose because they have all those gapes and holes. So that would be our neckline. That's just the taping it off. And as you can see, like I said, we were just going to keep this to the middle. But these dress forms have all these nice kind of seam lines and kind of visuals to help you figure out where to, like where the center front, center back is, all that kind of stuff. This is supposed to be the waistline. It dips a little bit on this one. I feel like the waistline's a little bit more here, like on the bottom of this, but whatever. You kind of get used to your own dress form. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tape off the side seams, the princess seams. I'm going to start with the side seam. I personally like to drape it a little bit off of this. This is their side seam. I like it a little bit further back. I think it's a little bit more flattering on the body. Makes you look a little slimmer. So that's going to be my preference. This just shows you that this is like a really flexible art. It's not super, you have to do it one way or the other. You can kind of play with it however you like. So for this, this is my side seam. Sorry if she's a little wiggle wobble, I apologize. Wish the wheels are a little bit more even, but they're not. So it is what it is. So I do that one. Oh, thank you so much for the follow. And then we're gonna do the side back piece seam. And if you're going to do a shearing panel, you wanna think about this as being how wide your shearing panel would be. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say shearing panel, most Lolita garments have a little stretch panel. I have one on my dress, and if you can see this, most Lolita dresses only have one size, so it's a nice kind of easy way to fit multiple sizes with one. So far we have a center back panel, a side back panel, and now we gotta pick the side front. We gotta decide where we want the princess seam to go. Depending on the cut of the dress, you might want the princess seam to go more into the armpit. That is an option. That's a thing you can totally have. Or you could have it more just straight over the bust, and you kind of want more of a straight line. Maybe that works better for your design, your print. Again, this is a very flexible way of doing things, so you get to pick however you want your pattern to look at the end of the day. For this one, I'm gonna go kind of straight, just for funsies. I don't usually do this one. I usually tend to put mine more into the armpit, but that's okay. See if that's kind of straight. Yeah. So now we've got center front, side front, side back, center back. Okay, any questions so far? Are we feeling pretty confident that that's not too difficult? Just making sure this tape isn't going to pop off, making sure it's on here pretty smoothly. It is a lot like masking tape, so it can come up kind of easily if you're not careful. So that's step one, is to tape your dress form with all the seam lines that you will be creating all your pattern pieces. All right, no questions. I'm going to go to step two, which is to get some muslin and start the actual draping process. You want to use whatever fabric is most similar to what you're doing. Ooh, I see something. Oh, it's a bit hard to hear me. Let me turn the volume on my mic up. I'm sorry. Let me do that really quick. Let me go back here. Sorry. Okay, so I turned the music down. I hope that helps. Let me know. Okay, so step 2 is picking your fabric to do your drape in. If you are just using like cottons or, you know, like most wovens, muslin's a really great place to start. If you're doing something in a knit, you should be working in a knit to start out with, because you're going to have to worry about things like negative ease. And a lot of knits don't really work well with princess seams and stuff like that, so it's really important to work with a good analog fabric. So like, let's say I'm making a dress in chiffon. Draping in muslin is not a great idea because muslin does not have that same fluidity that that chiffon or like charmeuse have. If you're doing something like in something really heavy like a denim, maybe a muslin's okay. If you get like a really starchy stiff one, it may not be a good idea. So think about that before you pick your draping fabric. If you're working in like a really high-end situation and you have the opportunity and the availability, you might even drape in your real actual fashion fabric because you want to have the same exact qualities of the fashion fabric or the self that you're going to end up using. So we're just draping in muslin today because this is just an example, and I often usually work in cottons anyways, so it's a great analog for what I'm working in normally. But that's just a kind of a side note asterisk. If you're working in something like a knit or something with a lot of stretch, you should be working in a similar fabric when you're doing your drape. And let me know if the audio is better now. I hope so. And again, I apologize for all the road noise. I live on like one of the busiest streets in the city, and the front room is like right up on the street, so you're gonna hear a lot of honking. I live across the street from like a grocery store, and it's a lot of people who are angrily trying to shop. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear it. So, got my muslin. Obviously, grain line's really important. If you have like a print that you're planning on working with that's printed on the bias or something like that, or you like have a stripe and you want to have biases, you know, striped stuff, you might want to consider cutting your fabric that you're going to drape with on the bias. Sometimes you need the bias to get certain shapes. This one's pretty straightforward. We're going to keep the grain line for the most part just straight down the body. And if you don't know what the grain line is, here's my muslin fabric. The grain line is parallel to the selvage edge of the fabric. The selvage is the edges of the fabric when it comes off the bolt. So this would be your selvage edge on this fabric. I tore off a little piece, like I said, to put here. So we're gonna, like I said, keep the grain line kind of straight down the body as best we can. So because the center front is straight down the middle, I'm just going to cut off a piece of fabric about the same size as our lovely model. I'm just going to tear off a piece. And then if you can, just tear your fabric. That way it'll stay kind of on the grain, more or less. I'm sure this is way bigger than what we need, but that's okay. Alright, I'm going to straighten this out. And what's really key to draping is kind of your pinning technique. So when you're draping, you don't just want to pin on one side of the thing. You want to pin kind of like these weird little V shapes. I don't know if you guys can see that enough. I can bring the camera a little closer if you need to see exactly what I'm talking about. But if you do these little V-shaped pins, where you pin on kind of both sides like that, it means that you can snug a fabric up over here without it pulling out. Whereas if I just did one way, it wouldn't do that. You could go to tug this fabric and it would come out. So it really anchors the fabric. All right, so I'm just gonna pin down the center front first, because that's a nice straight line. It's really easy to see. And if you feel the need to, when you're doing this, you can certainly draw on with a ruler before you even get started the grain line parallel to the fabric. Okay, the next deal I'm going to do is I'm going to trim out. I'm going to pin on this line, which you can now see through the fabric, which is why we use muslin mostly, is because it is semi-see-through and you can kind of see what you're doing. Yeah, absolutely. I will happily do that. Let me bring her a little closer, because you really don't need to see me doing things. You don't need to see my face. Who cares? Hopefully you can see that a little better. We're going to pin right on top of the line. I don't know if you can see through the fabric. Hopefully you can. If not, I can turn the contrast up on the camera a little bit more. It's hard to tell how these things are going to turn out when you're working on the setups. I haven't given this panel online before, only in person, so. So I'm just snugging the fabric up as I pin. Okay, I'm just going to trim away this extra so I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. It doesn't need to be here, it's fine, goodbye. And then around curvy parts like this, you often want to clip the fabric to release some of the tension. Just like if you're making seams in princess seams, you often clip the fabric, you know what I'm talking about? You make little pie cuts. It works, like, you really need to do it when you're shaping things like around arm size or around waists a lot, more than something like this particular shape. It's pretty straightforward, so it's not like a lot of curve. This side part, this side seam will probably have a lot more curve into it, so we probably are going to have to clip a lot more than we had to do for the center part. So the next part is really simple, is you just trace out with a pencil those pattern lines. And the reason I tend to use an 1/8 of an inch wide crepe tape instead of a 1/4 inch wide is the 1/4 inch is so big that it can be a problem. You kind of have to pick one side of the tape or another to trace on top of instead of tracing down the middle. Especially if you're trying to get like a really snug fit, I think that's kind of a problem. So if you can find an 1/8 of an inch crepe tape to do your draping in, it's a much better useful. Okay, so that was the center front piece, and then we're going to do the side front piece. So you just literally going to take your pins out. I'm going to just put them in the neck again, and I'll show you our semi-finished pattern piece. And you can't always drape everything. I find a lot of collars, for example, are actually really difficult to drape versus flat patterning. I prefer to drape over flat patterning, but they are both really useful techniques, and they both, like, having an understanding of both is really, really helpful. So if you ever wonder when you see some of my stock photos why my dress form has so many pins in the neck, you now have an idea of why. So one more nugget. Okay. Let me back her up for a second. It might be the brightness in general. Okay, I will go back and see if I can't adjust that. But I don't know if you can see, hopefully, our pattern piece. It's really faint on here. Let me go. I'm gonna trace this really quick in like a Sharpie because I don't care. It'll be fine. It'll be nice and bright for you guys to see. And it won't get on my dress form now that it's off. Okay. Hey. That's what it looks like. We're going to trace it off on a flat paper too, and I'll put an overhead camera over that in a minute too. So, I'm going to adjust the camera and see if I can't get this a little better for you guys. Okay, I tried adjusting the exposure. We'll see if that works. Okay, step 2. This side. Again, I'm gonna grab some muslin, and like I said, we're gonna try and keep the grain line kind of going straight down the body. And I'm like, which side is the grain line? All right, here. Let me see. Okay. So, making sure that's going to be right. There we go. And I'm going to trace the grain line on here really quick so you guys can see it nice and simple and be like, aha, I see what you're talking about. Make sure to. So, I'm going to try and keep that grain line more or less perpendicular to the floor as I start this. So I'm just going to do a quick pin just to get that in where I think it needs to be. And then I'm going to start pinning the side front seam that we talked about first. Yeah, no problem. It's always really hard to tell if it's like too dark, too bright, what's happening. And you see how I'm starting to get like weird little buckles into this fabric now, and this is what I was talking about earlier with how we're gonna have to clip out some of this extra fabric, and that's very, very normal. So already starting to get some of that buckling here. I'm gonna have a lot less of it on this side, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clip out, you see this buckle I'm talking about there? So the way you want to clip to these kind of lines is you just line your scissor, and you want to have blunt tip scissors. I have a lot of really great micro tip scissors. They are not good for this. You want your classic blunt tip scissors for this particular purpose. You want to put it on just above a line and just clip so you don't cut your fabric too deeply. And you'll see how like that just released all of that weird nonsense. And I didn't clip all the way down, and I need to clip further. And I'll release a lot of that weird tension that we were getting in the fabric. And then once you get like long hangy, you can just, you're gonna end up sweeping after this, I promise. Goodbye. Okay, and you can see how that released all that weird tension we had in there. And we're going to have some of that same problem happening over here with the waist, and we'll clip it there too. This is long and in my way, goodbye. Anything that's kind of excessive and kind of creating more trouble than it's worth keeping attached, you can just snip away. I always end up sweeping a ton after I have a day of draping. There's just like little snippets of muslin everywhere usually. Vroom, vroom. Alright. So as you can see, we've gotten the side seam down pretty nice and smoothly. And now we're gonna, because we have all that nice, this is all nice and tight, I can snug this up over a little bit easier across the front. And again, this is doing weird stuff with the waist, so trim that up. And I gotta trim off some of this excess. Goodbye. And this also really depends on like how tight and fitted you want something to be. You don't have to make it super snug either. And don't forget, once you get into the patterning section, like when you actually flat pattern this, you can do things like add ease. The nice thing about having those shearing panels in the back though is that like, that pretty much is your ease for a lot of patterns. So I think it's really nice to be able to just make it like as snug as possible and then use your shearing panel for ease. I'm gonna try and draw like right on these lines so it doesn't get on my dress form, so it shouldn't matter. It's taped, and I'm gonna draw really lightly. This doesn't have to be super straight and like super, like the cleanest lines ever. What you're gonna use this for is to go back in and trace this whole pattern off. At the end, and that's your chance to neaten everything up. And then you have to walk the pattern, and we'll talk about all of that later. So, step 2. Any questions so far? Again, I recommend doing that with a pencil. Yes, I am. And again, if you wanted to change the waistline of this pattern, you would just tape it in. I chose to just use this as my, I'm using the bottom edge as my, my waistline guide. But if you want to have like a higher waisted dress, or if you want to do it longer, just tape past the waist, and then like if you wanted to do a drop waist and then create your waistline. The most important thing I can say though, if you're going to do that, is to take a step back from your garment, like your taped on lines, and make sure that it is perpendicular to the floor. Or if you want an asymmetrical line, like you want a basque waist, you know, the type that like comes to a point, just take a step back and like really look at it. And if you are doing a basque waist, I highly recommend just cutting a quick like butterflied image out of the thing and like putting it on there, because sometimes it's hard to visualize things like sweetheart necklines, like how deep they really are when you only have half of it. And same for basque waistlines, like how deep or how wide it ends up looking until you can see both sides of that. That's one thing that I think is really hard to visualize if you're just doing a half drape like this. Oh, here, let me show you my should look like a fairly familiar shape if you sew. Like this looks like a princess seam piece to most people here, I think. And for reference, my dress form is about a US size 6. So I hope that helps. Like a medium, a nice medium. Sorry, just gonna make a quick drink. And then we're gonna do the side back and then the center back. I'm just gonna drape the center back as is. I know we talked about making a shearing panel, but I'll show you how to do that in flat patterning and not through a drape. Personally, I think that's one of those techniques that is better done in flat patterning than in a drape, in my opinion. So, this is what we're on here. Get a piece of fabric. And I'm going to draw the green line on again once I get the right amount of fabric here cut. We're not going to skimp on fabric for any of this. I went out and bought like 10 yards of muslin yesterday, so we're good. And I'm sorry it's also wrinkly. Like I said, I tossed it in the wash. I'm using a lot of muslin and lining for those face masks that I'm making right now, so it is all wash and pre-shrunk. So it got very wrinkly. And let me draw the green line over here. All of my pins are no longer on the neck of this thing, but I'm silly and I took them out, stuck them on my pin cushion instead. Well, that happens. Alright, I'm just going to lightly pin it up just so I can get it on the dress form before I start actually pinning it along the seam. And again, just kind of making sure that this looks like it's straight down the body. If you want to change that, that's totally okay. Like, again, say that I had a stripe and I really wanted some really dramatic diagonal lines. It'd be great to draw this on first, this green line, if you were just using muslin. And then be like, and then I want my dramatic green line to look like this on the body. And then pattern from here. Just to give an example of what I was talking about earlier. Boop. So I'm going to start with this seam that goes towards the center back. And then we can talk a little bit about notching and all that good stuff when we talk about flat patterning. How you doing today, Chewy? I know you're only here for Sheila's magical ways and good looks. We could all wish to have such a classic figure. And this is a very straightforward piece because it doesn't have any curves. I think the most challenging piece to drape on this whole pattern is probably the side front. Okay, that's pretty much it. And we'll just trace it out. I mean, it can be helpful to have, like, if you're doing straps, just have a piece of ribbon kind of stand in for your strap so you can have an idea of, like, where that's going to hit and your seams. I didn't do that, obviously, but that's also a good idea. You are dramatic today. So, because this one looks so similar on both sides, I'm gonna write a quick note. This is to side, like the side seam. Side seam, side back. Because this is like almost, I mean, it will make sense when I actually start going into the pattern and flat patterning it, but it looks so similar on both sides, it kind of almost looks like a rectangle, so it's like, which side is what? So that'll be useful information to have for myself. Then I'm just going to use this little scrap I have here, for this very small piece back here, and we're going to start, this is the grain, just going to use that as my center back. Oh, Chewy. Beep, beep. Okay, I really feel like I need to get this one like super pinned on here because it's so straightforward. A super unstraight hand. Okay, and that's your center back. Guys, that was all like the, what, 30 minutes is how long it takes to drape a bodice. Make your very own pattern that fits your body if you have a duct tape dress form or one of those dress forms that's more adjustable. You've essentially created your own pattern. So from here, I'm going to try and put the camera overhead and show you how to flat pattern this stuff. So let me adjust the camera really quickly. Let's see, this is the top, so I think there might be some cord in the way. All right. So this should be up. Hopefully it's correct. Please feel free to let me know if it's not. And I'm going to iron this because this is so it's grungy. Oh my god. Donation hype. I can't see who that is right now, but thank you. Silly gooses. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Alrighty. Let me grab some paper and we'll trace this up. So tools for transferring your pattern to a piece of paper: tracing wheel, pencil, ruler, and French curve of some sort. It doesn't have to be this one. I love this one because it's clear and you can see through it. A lot of them are metal. Whatever works for you. Let me grab some paper though. Our best. Okay. So this paper is called Good Guide Pattern Paper. It's used for drafting patterns. You can just use regular paper. It's a little better to use something a little bit lighter because sometimes you need to trace things through. We'll do a little bit of that in a little bit. But what I like about the Good Guide stuff is that it comes with a grid on it, so it's really easy to just like make a nice grain line that I can easily line up with this pattern, what we have started here. And then take your tracing wheel, and I hope I'm centered so you guys can actually see what's happening. Please feel free to yell at me if I'm in your way and you can't see what's going on at any point in this. Oop, that moved a little bit. That's your complaint. Joey! We can take you exactly no places. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see. There's some very small perforations now. And I can use those to trace out this pattern. This is the sides, side back. And again, I know I didn't trace these particularly straight at any point in time, so feel free to straighten out your lines. I think that was really crooked, for example. What was I doing? My traces look drunk. Okay. And just to double check, I'm going to cut this thing out more or less and just see if it lays kind of on here. Looks pretty good. So this will be my side back piece. And I'm just going to draw like 3 arbitrary notches in here just for now. That's not where the notches go. This is without seam allowance, so as you I'm hopefully sure understand that this piece is no seam allowance on it. So for me, my side seams I usually do 1/2 inch seam allowance. Traditionally, if you're using commercial patterns, they use 5/8. I hate that, but whatever works for you. And this is slightly curved, so we're gonna slightly curve it too. I use 1/4 inch seam allowance for necklines, personally. And I like 1/2 inch seam allowances for waistlines. So that would be my side back piece. Completely 100% done. And then I could, just gonna rough cut this out just so I can get it out of here and have more space to work. Goodbye. This one, center front. As I'm sure most of you do, center front should be on the fold. So center front on fold. So we're not going to add any seam allowance to that. Of course, that can change if you have like a center front zipper or if you're doing some sort of front closure or not. I'm just going to grab what's called a pattern weight so we don't have that problem where it slipped out from me earlier. This seems to dip a little bit, and I think I'm going to straighten that out because you kind of want a straight across front. So I'm going to adjust that. Oh my god, someone's got some mail here. I'm going to hope my roommates go get that, not me. Obviously I'm in the middle of something. Boys. It looks like they are not going to answer that, so I'm going to go get it. Sorry. 5 seconds, guys. Really? Okay. Sorry about that. Hands are now washed. Okay. Still, I hate to keep my mail person waiting. She's really, really nice. So I was like, are you guys gonna answer the door? What are you doing? Again, we can put our seam allowance on here. And if you guys want to do something like a princess, I'm sorry, not princess, a sweetheart neckline, you can still do that even in flat patterning. You don't have to do that on the dress form. You can do that after the fact. I'll show you that just a second. Just tracing in our seam allowance here. And this is gotta be one of my favorite rollers out there because it is see-through. And it makes everything super easy to work with. Okay. So let's say you wanted to change this to a sweetheart neckline. Let's just say we dropped it, I don't know, an inch. And you can use a curve. And you want to draw it first without the seam allowance, so you get an idea of what that would look like, and then you would add the seam allowance in. And like that's as easy as this is. It's not complicated. If you do a very dramatic one, like you want to have kind of more of like this shape, then you need to do the other side, the side panel, I'm sorry, the side front panel. But this is pretty typical for how Lolita dresses are. It's a very subtle sweetheart, so you just need to do the center front panel. So super easy, don't overthink it. Again, can do in flat patterning. And that piece. And we'll do, I think there's enough room for side back. We could maybe fit side front on here. Yeah, we could fit side front on here. pattern weights. Super garbage job of tracing on this side. It's funny. What are you doing? Who knows? Excellent question. What was I doing? Okay. Bust point's a little higher than that. I feel like one of my neighbors is out front on a business call. I feel like you can hear him talking. Yeah, I'm not going to draw the seam allowance on this yet until I walk this pattern piece. So far we haven't had any pattern pieces that were like super... I don't think they are because they don't think they can hear me. They're outside and I doubt they can hear me talking. It's weird, I don't know. Because there's a lot more like street noise for them with the wind and stuff, but I don't think they can hear me talking to myself. Alright, so I'm gonna walk this pattern, and I don't know how much you're gonna be able to see this. But what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take this pattern line and I'm going to put it, I'm gonna put it right on top and just make sure it's the same exact length. And this is called walking your pattern. And as it stands, this is much longer. So I'm going to adjust this piece a little bit. It's a little too long. So ways I can undo that is I can take some of this curve out. I think it looks a little weirdly busty right now for what I know my dress form to be. So if I take a little bit of this out, take a little distance out of that. And it might be that the waistline's a little long on this piece too, so I might raise the waistline a little bit. So we'll see if that small adjustment helped. It may not be enough though. So we're still off by about 1/4 inch. So I think I'm going to take 1/4 inch out of this bottom. Which may affect the side seam too. So that's how I think this pattern piece should be. It could just be that I mistraced where the waistline is, because on the dress form it was a piece of ribbon, so it can shift a little bit. So that's why you walk your pattern, you double check. And then, do we have side back? Yes, we do. So we're gonna do the same thing on this side. This is the side, this is the back, this is the side seam. And now we're also too long on this side, which is fine. We're gonna shorten this too. Again, same possible reasoning. So that's why I haven't cut any of these patterns out yet, is because I have to sit here and walk the pattern piece first to make sure that the adjustments are reasonable. Before we do the setting rack. And so I'll go back and redo where the seam allowance actually is. Okay. So now I can put the seam allowance actually on this piece, which wasn't here before. So far, we have any questions about patterning or draping? So these three are done. Don't even know what I'm looking at. That's all right. No worries. That's completely acceptable. All right, and this is our center back seam. So I don't need these anymore. I can throw them away. I'm going to because they're just messes in my fabrics. So I'm just gonna toss them. But if you are going to keep this pattern, if you're going to use it, you might want to hold on to these just for a little bit longer to make sure that they all fit. I might really have plans to use this pattern, so per se, there's nothing wrong with it. I just don't need another princess theme bodice right now. Need one more piece of paper. And I'm doing this one really long because I'm going to show you guys how to take this idea and then make it into, we were talking about doing a shirring panel. So, okay, sure. It's going to be a lot easier for me to do that. So these pieces are really going to be some of the harder ones to walk. So I'm going to cut them out really quick so you can see me do it. There's another way to walk that isn't that way we just did, and you'll be able to understand exactly what I was talking about. Let's do that real quick before I do this last. So now I'm just going to cut this one all the way out because we've already walked it and we know that it's going to work. It'll be so much easier to visualize if I had one of these pieces of pattern fully freed. And this is not my fabric scissors. I'm sure you all know and can guess that. These are my paper scissors. There's a difference. Okay. So, another way to walk, besides the way I was doing it, is to do what it would be like if it was sewn. So now I have a seam allowance on here. If you didn't have a seam allowance, you could still walk it and then go back and trace another copy. what I'm doing is just like, okay, and then pivoting the pattern as I go so that these seam lines that I can see through the paper are lining up. And that's why I was saying you don't really want to use like printer paper if you can help it, because it's kind of thick to see through. You're trying to do stuff like this. Did that make sense? Did you see what I was doing there? I'm literally just trying to line this seam up and just hold it and pivot it through as if I was sewing it, and making sure that like when I get to the ends, they're the same length, essentially. Does that make sense? Okay, great. The way I was doing it before was I was essentially like laying these on and putting these, just the pattern with no seam allowance. I was lining them up, like laying them on top of each other. And you can kind of see it a little bit better now that I've freed it of the paper. And this is what I was doing before. Does that make sense? Yeah. Got it. Yeah. It's a little hard to see, but like I said, I didn't want to like throw away the paper if I had to adjust it. So we're good now. All right. So last pattern piece is this guy. This one is our center back. Yes, just making sure. I'm leaving a lot of room here because we're going to talk about how to turn this into a shirring piece. So what I would do is if I had that pattern piece and then I had this still handy, I would probably, because the center front is going to be the easier piece to adjust than the side front, I would have probably taken it and lined it up. I'm not really able to show you because you can't see my face right now. I would have taken it and lined it up on my body in the mirror, the center front piece, the actual piece of fabric, lined it up on my body and see which one of those lengths I liked best. Because honestly, the center front is the piece that is going to be most visually understandable for you. So I would have taken this and held this essentially right up on my body if this was for me, and have been like, can I shorten this? Will it look stupid if I take off? Because that will have no seam allowance on it, right? I would cut it all the way out with no seam allowance on it. And I would hold it up to my body and go, do I like where this waistline hits me? Or do I hate it? And you might decide that you actually like the waistline, but I don't like the neckline, and you can take off the neckline instead. Totally kind of up to you how you want to deal with that. And it's always okay to have, I think, the princess seam, the side seam, be a little short. That would be this part, because you have bias in here, and so you can stretch this to fit the center front seam. Versus if this is too short, there's not much you can do to stretch it to meet the way this fits. So that's what I would do if I was trying to make sure this fits my body. Again, I'm not designing this for anybody in particular, so I would probably just throw it up on my dress form and be like, I don't like where this waistline is per se. Like, it's not that cute. And I have to have the feel for my customer, because my dress form itself is a little broader and a little taller than my average customer. So I always tend to shorten it a little bit rather than make things longer, just based on my clientele and knowing that in my head. But if this were for me, though, I would have definitely taken it and looked at the length on my body first and foremost. That would have been very important to me. Okay, center back. Okay, so I left like all this extra paper because this is going to become our shirring area, because I know we talked about doing that. And again, we're going to have to walk this pattern as well. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit shorter. Like I said, I tend to shorten things. I was like, and most people don't want long stuff. It's fine. So we're going to make sure this piece fits. The side back piece, which I'm having doubts now because I've shortened everything so much. Side back. okay. It's like I have to shorten it just a teeny bit. It's not too bad. I just use this to mark where I need to shorten it too. But yeah, a lot of my patterns, because this dress form's a little bit tall, I end up shortening anyway, so it's fine. But again, this would be, if this was for you, you should do with what looks good on your body. My average customer, so I kind of have two groups. I have my more like plus size customer, and then my normal customer usually is about, they're not short actually, they're just not as tall. This is like, my dress form is very model-esque body proportions, which would make her like 5'9" or taller. My clientele usually is about like 5'6" or 5'7". And they could still be tall or short-waisted within that, so that's kind of like a non sequitur in its own way. It's like, that doesn't mean much. They tend to be about the same proportions as far as like waist and bust size as like a US medium. What am I doing? I don't speak Portuguese. Sorry, do you speak Spanish at all? I could maybe give some idea of what I'm doing in Spanish. Castilian. I don't speak anything else. I like how you think I'm cute even though you can't really see me. Okay. So, this is my center back piece. Now, if I was just going to do a center back zipper, I would just add seam allowance for that. But we talked about how in Lolita, a lot of times we do what's called a shirring panel. So this would be my pattern piece if I was just doing it like a center back and this is done. You understand a little? I don't speak great Spanish, especially like with sewing, ironically. I can speak regular Spanish fine, but I don't know any terms about sewing. We're working on a pattern. I don't know what the word for that is in Portuguese. If someone wants to Google Translate for them making a pattern, you can tell them that. So what I would do is I would add however much stretch room I want to this. And you don't want to add too much stretch room because it ends up bulking up. So, and here's another thing. So your elastic that you're using, let me just grab some elastic because that's what shearing panels are, is they're little elastic sections. Only has so much stretch anyways. So at the end of the day, we want the elastic to be this finished width, right? So let's say that is my finished width, my elastic, right? Doubled up. So you can take this and you can stretch it. And that is only as big as you can make your shearing panel realistically. So here, I just stretch it. And that's as far as you can really go. And if that's a really simple way for you to figure out how big you can really make your shearing panel, if that helps you at all. Often that's just double. But yeah, so just take a piece of elastic, put it on your pattern, hold it down. That's the width of your center back, and just stretch it all the way out and kind of make a mark on your pattern paper. And for me, that's about here, and that is as far as you can possibly pretty much stretch this. And you're just going to draw a straight line. And remember, this is going to be on the fold, You're going to have a side zipper somewhere. On fold. That's not how you spell fold. Good God. Fold. And then just draw straight lines out to meet this new center back. That was seriously it. This is now a shirring panel. You want to draw your elastic lines on here, wherever you want those to be. I don't know. This one would be up here, I guess. 1/2 inch. There are tools to evenly distribute things. I don't have one on me, so I'm just gonna be lazy. Just be like, that's the middle, so if I have one, I think it's the worst. What is this? It's about 3 inches, so I don't know. Is elastic for shearing better in that size? Oh, like, are you talking about like a 1/2 inch elastic? It doesn't matter. I have that's just one I had out handy. So this is a 3/8 inch, I think. Yeah, this is a 1/4 inch. This is a 3/8 inch. It doesn't matter. Like, you could do the same process. Sorry, let's do it from here. It's about the same amount of stretch. This is a braided elastic. Knit elastic has a different amount of stretch. But that's a really easy way to kind of give yourself a guide for like how much stretch you're going to get out of a shearing panel. So why waste your time making the shearing panel bigger if your elastic is not going to stretch any bigger? This is just like a, yeah, it doesn't matter. But yeah, you can, I wouldn't use like a really thick one. I would probably keep it like 1/2 inch or under. I wouldn't go as small as an 1/8 either. So anything between like 5/8 to a 1/4 inch is probably an appropriate size. But yeah, I'm not going to go through all the trouble of like evenly distributing these elastic channels because this is not, again, not a pattern I plan on using. So I'm just going to draw some on here kind of arbitrarily, guys. I'm sure somebody somewhere is going to find that really offensive, but how could you just draw some arbitrary? Yeah, whatever. That's not right. But there's a tool that you can use to evenly space things. I don't have one. They're really handy. I forget what they're called. They're for pretty much spacing out buttonholes. If you want to get specific about it, they're probably a much better tool for this than what I just did. That is so true. But, you know, people who, like, love perfect straight lines, I'm deeply upsetting them without them knowing why. Like, somewhere somebody is like, there's a disturbance in the force and they don't know what happened. It was me. You know what, that's distributed enough that I wouldn't mess with it. Like, if that were what I ended up with, they're not perfectly matched, but they're okay. So that would be your whole pattern. I'm going to cut it out just so you can see all the pattern pieces like evenly distributed, and then we'll talk a little bit about how to notch your pattern. And then that's pretty much all of the things I plan to cover today. You are free to ask questions while I get this ready. Now is a great time for that. Thank you so much for the follow. Appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying learning some stuff with us today. It sounds like we're going to probably be doing a few more panels. The other one I had planned to do for Fanime this year was about pattern drafting. So I would do a little bit more in depth on some patterning techniques. Pretty similar to some of the stuff we're doing today. absolutely. It's been fun to kind of go over some of these like design principles. And talk about fit and stuff. Okay, so I'm going to grab my pattern notcher so I can show you the way that I notch my patterns, and we can talk about traditionally how you're supposed to notch your patterns. So there's two ways to indicate, well, there's three ways. A notch. I'm going to notch these elastic channels. So a notch, when you're patterning for like professional patterning, can either be one of these little T-square notches, in which case it's just a little snip into the fabric, and what you're more used to seeing in like commercial patterns perhaps, are kind of call them castle notches, and they look like a little line like that, and when you cut the fabric out, you actually cut it, like if this was me cutting out the fabric, cut this little triangle out like that. That's more traditionally the way people traditionally maybe see patterns done in commercial patterns. There's nothing wrong with that. This is just not typically how you do notches in commercial patterning, which is the way I'm doing it now. And if you do this, you can do this in commercial patterning, but it tends to be for things like knits or laces, where a snip in would be really damaging to the fabric. I like how I've gotten gray graphite fingers. The other type of notch you can do is with what's called a pattern notcher. And that's what I'm going to do with some of these guys. And you would just literally line up your pattern pieces like you were going to sew them. You could just make a nice couple of notches to indicate which pieces match which pieces. The further back on the body you go, the more notches traditionally you put in. So what I mean by that is like the front, so the center front pattern piece, I would only do one notch on, and this is the side seam, so I'm going to do two. This is the side seam here. And on the back, what would match this guy, I'm going to do three, but I'm going to try and avoid where all the shearing garbage is. I'm going to do it on this side. And that would indicate that's further back on the body than this is, and then this one should just get one notch, but because it's on a curve, you're going to just, you want to do notches as you walk it that kind of indicate where these things should line up. So I'm just going to do one here, and do one here. But they're very spaced out. They're not like, oops, I missed that one. Did not really take on this piece of paper. I see where it was supposed to be. So hopefully that makes sense, how that indicates things for you guys. Shearing garbage. I know, I'm so delicate with my speech. Does that all make sense to you? Notching and why we do it and how we do it? Does this look like a reasonable pattern? Does this look like something that you would see and make sense and you're not like, I don't understand? And we talked about how you can make a sweetheart neckline really easily just by dropping the neckline in the center front, and you could see how that would look. Another thing you could do that's very common in Lolita is like make yokes, and you could just literally take your pattern and just trace out where you would want the yoke to be on these pattern pieces, and just trace this out and then cut it out and then add seam allowance. Again, understanding how patterns work, it's really helpful. It's just like making all these pieces. I have no idea why it's called that. It is heart shaped. I don't know why it needs to be sweetheart shaped. I don't know. I didn't come up with this. But that is the name for it. And a pointed waistline is called a Basque waistline. I don't know what that has to do with anything with País Vasco, which is the Basque country. I'm sure there's history there. I'm sure there's a reason. I don't know what it is. Yeah, exactly, because it sounds really lovely. It's a good reason, right? It sounds very sweet and adorable. Basketball? Nah. No, I don't think that's the reason. Yeah, I'm sure it has something to do with the history of Europe, and I don't know. Kawaii desho. Alright, so any more questions I can answer for you guys about... Yeah, I know. It's really hard to do this without a dress form. You can if you want to. I think I put... Yeah, if you go to the patterning, I'm sorry, the panel thing that I sent you guys, it's on the screen, go to the website. There's a really cool pattern on how to make a dress form that fits your body out of fabric that you could stuff. If you are like trying to do this on a budget and you want this to really fit your body. Like this dress form is a little smaller than I am these days. So this isn't my size anymore anyways. But yeah. I think there's a link to there that I had a friend who did it and she said it came out really, really well. So maybe check that. I think it's called like boot jack or bootstrap or something like that, patterns. And that I hear works really, really well. So if you're interested in making a dress form that's really your size, that information is on that website. But yeah, and there's also some books on the very bottom of that are on draping techniques, including things like cowl necklines, how to drape sleeves and collars and stuff, which I think work better in flat patterning, but that's just me. Some people really love draping, love the feel of the fabric in their hands. And I'm a huge fan of draping, but there are times where I'm like, this could take so much more time and effort when I could just flat pattern. So having an understanding of both, I think, is really helpful. But yeah, last chance for some questions. I'm going to go quickly rinse the gray off my fingers while you guys think about anything. And then let me know if there's anything else you'd be interested in like a panel on, because I think we are going to do some more of these digital pattern panels for you guys going forward. So hold on a second, so I'm going to wash. Tilt this a little bit more my way instead of... Here we go. Yeah, I think what's really neat about draping is how quickly you can go from like an idea to I can start making something. I think that's a really exciting part about draping. I know some people who want to do, like, who want to make corsets will do, like, this is another way to do, like, a simple drape. If you, well, I don't know, I think this is actually kind of hard in its own way, but you can tape yourself up with masking tape and then trace the shapes that you want out on, just straight on the masking tape. And if you're wearing, like, a tight tank top that you don't mind cutting up, and you just cut that out and then use the masking tape as your pattern and trace that off and add seam allowance, and that's a fitted pattern. That totally works. That is using the concepts of draping. Absolutely. If you don't have a dress form and you really want to cheat, like, I don't have any problem saying that you could totally do that. A lot of cosplayers use that. Oh, it's just called a pattern notcher. This guy. They're about like 15 bucks. It's like a hole punch. It works better. It doesn't work that great on paper. It works better on stuff that's thicker. Patterns that I reuse a lot, I trace off onto cardstock. Like these guys, for example. And I like that I traced this so recently that I haven't even notched it, so I will do that for you. It works really well on thick paper versus what I call regular pattern paper. And I can add that to the list of tools on that webpage. There you go. But yeah, this is an example of one of my patterns. And maybe next time, if I do this again, I'll do a pattern that's got darts in it, because it's actually a little bit different technique than if you're just doing seams. So maybe I'll do one with darts at some point. But yeah, the duct tape thing is a totally valid cheat way to do a drape, essentially. So if you don't have a dress form and you really, really want to make something that fits you really quickly, get a really cheap t-shirt that fits really tightly, and have a friend help you trace out shapes on top of, just like I said, just take masking tape, tape your whole body, upper body up, trace out your lines, and just cut the shirt off of you with using those lines. And there you go, you're done. It will be very fitted, and it may not work in the fabric that you want, but at least you'll have a starting place. So that's a really easy, sneaky way to try this out, using some of the same principles and same concepts. Again, my only concern is that the fabrics may not translate that well when you're doing that, but at least you'll have something to start off on. And I know it's really hard for people who are plus size to find patterns that fit their body, especially if they're petite. The pattern, the commercial pattern industry can be absolute garbage for you, and I totally understand that. Any other questions I can answer for you guys? We can definitely talk more about fit. That stuff can be really hard to kind of nail down the problems. I mean, we could do something called a full bust adjustment on screen sometime if you want. For me, having a concept of draping and how draping works, making a mock-up muslin and then taking it, putting it on a person, and seeing how it doesn't fit allows me to take my draping concepts and pin things out and be like, this much fabric needs to come out of this part of the pattern, and this, and this. So having a really great grounding in draping, I think, will help a lot with your ability to adjust your patterns. But we can talk about some really specific issues that I see crop up a lot, like full bust adjustments. Neckline problems, I think, are really common, where the neckline gets a little too big and gaping away from the body, because there's, someone's bigger bust, and so they just make the whole upper thing bigger. I think that's a very common issue that I see a lot of. But yeah, any last questions for you guys today? I've had a lot of fun doing this, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I did. And Collars that don't lay flat. Are you talking about what kind of collar? Let's start with that. Just so I can know. Are you talking about like a Peter Pan collar that doesn't have a collar stand? Are you talking about a collar on a coat? A collar on a shirt? Thank you so much for the follow. And if you guys ever tune into my regular streaming, I usually am just sitting here sewing. I can't always, I'm not like the best at paying attention to the chat when it's one of my regular streams because I am just like banging things out, but I try and like eventually check my messages and answer questions about what I'm doing. But I think these panel streams are a little bit better if you're here to learn. Otherwise, my regular streams are just me being like, ah, cut things out, I'm not even on camera. Oh, a Peter Pan collar. That is actually something really, really easy. Oh my god, thank you so much for the subscription. I hope you like all of my stuff that is Sheila themed. Sheila is my dress form, so half the stuff about my stream is based on Sheila. I can actually really easily answer why your collars aren't laying flat. Let me see if I have a pattern handy. Give me 1 second. That's probably not one. So I have to find one that would work for what you just asked about. That's, give me a minute. This is actually such an easy question to answer if I had what I'm looking for. Okay, well, I can just draw one out really quick. This is not going to be the best pattern. It's not going to be the most realistic. Okay. We're just going to make believe that this is 2 pattern pieces. I really wish... Let me check one more time. I have one here someplace that is pretty exactly what we need. Let me go find it. I really want to find one. Okay. I got one right here. This is one of my personal patterns. We only really need the pieces that have the neckline. Alright, so hopefully these are familiar pattern shapes for you. This is the back neck, it has a yoke. This is the center front. Let's pretend I wanted to make a collar for this. Right? Easy. So easy. Can't even tell you how easy. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tape down the seam. I hope you can see half inch, like just tape down exactly where the seam is. And then all I'm going to do, and you can do this on the dress form so it's more three-dimensional and you can kind of visualize what you're looking at. All you're going to do though is to decide what you want your collar to look like. I think it would look really nice. Like this. That's the color I think I want. Okay, and I'm just gonna like make this a little prettier and not just a hot mess. Okay. Do you see that this would be the collar now? Alright, so the biggest problem people have when they try and do this is they don't tape this together and they don't use this is your actual neckline. What you need to do then is just trace this out. You already have, this is your neckline seam allowance. You just keep this exact shape identically. You trace this piece out using your tracing wheel onto a fresh piece of paper, add seam allowance, and that is it. That's all you have to do. If you're having your collar pop up off the body, what you're having happen is the neckline isn't exactly right. It's not exactly the same neckline, or there's too much fabric in the shoulder. And what I mean by that is that you thought this looked like this was the line, and you can see how this is already starting to buckle weird. You need this to line up exactly the way the seam allowance on the shoulder lines up. So, hope that answered that question. This is like one of the easiest ones to do. Just take your pattern pieces that form the neckline, tape off the shoulder, draw the way you want your pattern to look, like your collar to look. And again, feel free to check how this looks on the dress form. Is this a cute collar? Do you like the way this collar looks? Do you think it needs to be a little pointier? Do you think it needs to be straighter? Figure that out when you put it on your dress form or put it on your body. And then just, like I said, trace this whole thing out and then add, I would do like a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this whole thing. And that's it. It's super, super easy. I love making Peter Pan collars. It takes like 5 minutes. The most common thing that happens is that you are not exactly taping off and lining this up. Or the other thing that's happening is when you sew this seam is you are stretching it. Because it is curved and biasy, that is also something that can happen. So make sure you interface this pattern piece and make sure that you interface it, like you cut it out and interface it, and it's a non-stretchy, non-woven thing. That's the other thing that can happen, is because it is such a curved shape, almost all of this thing is biased. So if this thing is not laying flat, that's another problem that can easily be happening, is that you've accidentally, as you've been sewing, stretched it out. And so this is now too big. You can, and if you're still having problems with it getting too big and stretched out, even after you've interfaced it before you sew it, yeah, if you've been doing this concept and you still have that problem, then it's probably the bias. You can also use a stay stitch to try and keep it from stretching, but definitely interface and pick an interfacing that's quite stiff and has no stretch for you, and be very aware that you might be stretching it out as you go along, and make sure you're not doing that. It's better for it to be a little snug so it cups to the body than it is for it to be stretched out. So yeah, I think if that is your problem, then it's probably the bias. Especially if you're using something slinky and stretchy, make your collar out of something really, really stable if you can. Yep, absolutely. Try interfacing it with a fusible. That should help a lot. Even if it's a lightweight fusible, as long as it's not a stretchy fabric, it should help a lot. That is the main problem I see with collars like that. Any other questions I can help with today before I sign out and go get some food? If you want, I will probably take a minute to like just quickly sew up a muslin mock-up of this for you guys to see. I'm not going to do the shirring panel, but just so you guys can like see how this thing came out versus the drape, and just leave it on my Instagram later so you guys can see how we did. If we completely were off and I'm just making this up. But it'll be fun. A fun little quick project just to check it out. Yeah, I think I'll do that. Alright guys, well thank you so much for tuning in today. And again, we'll come up with some other topics. I'm going to do another flat pattern on kind of more of like a gored skirt or like a princess seam skirt. like an A-line skirt. I think a lot of people see that in Lolita. There's not a ton of patterns for it though, so a lot of people want to know how you do that. Sorry, I just got a little phlegm in my throat there. That was what I was planning on teaching at Fanime this year. So hopefully I'll be able to do that for you guys in this situation. I'll have a front-facing camera. I didn't set today's stream up for that, but I've enjoyed it. You guys are great, and if you have any questions, you're always welcome to throw them up at me in the comment section of the Facebook posts that I've been posting. Yeah, it's one that I don't see a lot of, so I will try and demonstrate how that works. But yeah, so we will, I don't have a scheduled time or date for that yet, but keep up on Facebook and on Instagram. I'm trying to post that information for you guys. And again, if you guys ever want to tune in during my regular streams, I'm just here sewing, and I may not, like I said, see your questions right away, but I try to take a gander at the chat every once in a while. So I hope you guys are doing well. I know it's really hard on all of us to be in doing this isolation stuff, but we're all gonna make it through, guys. Yeah, take care, and I'm gonna go get some food.